All right, welcome back to the Play 2 podcast. This is the first episode of 2025 that we are dropping, that we filmed at the back end of 2024 with a gentleman called Justin Miclat. He's got a very cool story, runs a company called the Kinetic Group, which is a talent agency based in video games. And he once upon a time was a lawyer, made that pivot over to talent agency in the traditional sports scene, moved that over to gaming, met a gentleman called Nick Mercs while he's working for a company called 100 Thieves, and then a series of events happened that led him to start his own company, which you will learn about in this podcast. Justin's been extremely successful with an approach that he coined the Moneyball Approach to gaming, paired this with his put value for creators first and how he can be of service. You can learn a lot from this episode, whether you want to be in talent management or not. And I really want to thank Justin for his time. I hope you guys enjoy the episode. And if you learned something, please don't forget to give us a rating on Spotify. Hit a follow if you don't want to miss future episodes. But most importantly, enjoy it. Sweet. What is your sport then? If baseball's not like the one, is it American football?
I watch a lot of football, but I can't watch every game. I'm just not as invested or interested. I can watch literally any basketball game, any team. I just love the sport, right? It moves quickly enough, and for me, it's just like the accessibility of some of the players and teams. I think people discount how hard it is to connect with some of the players when you've got the helmet and the gear, and when it's a massive spectacle, you lose kind of that human element. So I've always just been drawn to basketball as a sport from that perspective.
Because you can see the entire human.
Yeah.
Probably why you like UFC as well. You can see UFC, pretty raw.
Bro, I grew up a massive wrestling fan, WWF. I
used to love it.
Pro wrestling.
Yeah.
That was like my initial love. At the time, I thought it was a sport, right? But so personality driven, what felt like so raw. And so that was kind of like my introduction into sports and entertainment.
It was the storylines though. They were so good at writing. They obviously had a team of writers because it's not a sport that you can't write a game of NFL or a game of American football.
Right.
You can write a wrestling match.
Yeah.
And they did it so well with the drama and the entrances, the way the games were finished, random extra characters jumping in. It was like almost early day Avengers.
Yeah. And it's almost like now as an adult, and maybe a part of it is because of my professional life and career, I appreciate wrestling even more now because now I know how much effort and intentionality goes with like the story writing.
Yeah.
Whereas before I was like, oh, these are just massive, gods fighting each other, right? And I was like, oh, okay, like there's so much story. Like they're literally writing TV shows and movies weekly and touring it 365 days a year. So much of a production that I appreciate.
Tell you one person I was really impressed by, and he always I think this is how he goes with a lot of people, but Logan Paul is always up and down in my book. Like some things you do, I think is insane. Some I'm like, not so good. But that's what being a creative is, I suppose. Yeah. But I honestly thought his dip into the wrestling world was awesome.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed by his ability. He was doing backflips off the top rope and shit. I was like, he's an athlete.
He's a legitimate athlete, right? Plus the fact that he's a massive personality and he has that self-awareness to be able to bring it all together, right? It's tough when you see people at the top of their game, right? Whether they be athletes or, musicians or video game players, right? Who are great and should be respected, but like there's so much more that they could do to round it out and be this whatever, bigger and better than what they are naturally. When you get someone like Logan Paul, whether you like some of the things that he does or not, like you can appreciate how he's self-aware enough to make the most of his window. You know?
And going back to what you said with like the wrestling, the storylines and leaning into the villain arc, they've definitely done that, especially Jake.
Yeah.
Like he's seen that script and he's been like, okay, I'm going to be the villain.
Yeah.
And it's worked so well for them from a marketing point of view. Again, whether you like them or not, you can't fault the genius of it. And they're so strategic.
What I've appreciated about them and like other people in the entertainment space, right, that have found and created success, I would say, maybe not found, but created more than anything else, just like consistently and persistently telling stories, iterating, reiterating, fact-finding, just gaining more insights and information, whether it be about themselves, with their appetite for doing this or that, or their audience, right? As long as you're learning or gaining something or losing something. But as long as there's some constant change, it's a win, right? It's a success as long as there's something new that you found or developed or curated.
Yeah. I know you've got a unique approach from this, a unique perspective, I should say.
Yeah.
Because you are an extremely large talent manager. So like the way I did want to kick this off is like, just tell me in as short form as you possibly can, if you can, what it's like to be managing the largest creators in the gaming space, one of the biggest, fastest growing industries in the world. What does that feel like? What's that? Is it pressure? Is it excitement all the time? What is it, just in a nutshell to you?
It was so much pressure initially, right? And I would say there's always pressure behind being in a position, an opportunity to be of service to people, right? At least for me personally, that's kind of the number one priority. So when I started it, it was always, am I good enough, right? Am I going to be able to bring enough value? Am I providing a service that this client, this person truly cares about or will believe in, right? And so I would do so much preparation. I would do so much because I have a legal background, right? I have a law degree. I did all the formal education you could think of. Never actually practiced law or worked as an attorney, but I prepared for some of these client meetings and building my business in the same way that I would as if I was preparing to, for what I imagined would at least be a trial or a case, right? So all the arguments, counter arguments, etc. But it was nuts, and I would,
it's amazing
for
approach.
A simple, $10,000 sponsorship deal that I would present to Nick, I would have my whole thing. I literally approach it as if I was going to get into some debate or mediation, understand the points and counterpoints. And so, long-winded way of saying...
cheating. I feel like that's like so OP to think about it from a law perspective. No one had any chance against you then, really.
I think that's by and large where I've found success and been able to alleviate a lot of that pressure, is just over the course of time, giving myself enough credit and having enough confidence with the more reps that I got and the preparation to know and think and believe I'm going to wear you out. I don't necessarily need to win, but you're going to hear me. And if I come to you with an idea, thought, or opportunity, it's because it's meaningful, and I'll make sure it's impactful. And so, but at first, right, there was so much pressure because I was just unsure, very super green, inexperienced, and it was a space where the type of professionalism that I was trying to bring to the table wasn't quite as common.
Right.
And so just over the course of time of really getting that buy-in, getting that partnership and collaboration from Nick, and then subsequently other clients, it made it easier. I still prepare similarly, maybe not as intensely. Thankfully, I have a team that allows me to kind of think a little bigger picture.
Yeah.
But it was immense pressure initially because there wasn't a gold standard. There wasn't a model or an approach, right? I took learnings from other areas of entertainment, right? Sports agents, music executives who I hope to similarly provide that type of impact within the gaming and esports and live streaming space, but it was never apples to apples.
Yeah.
Right.
I love the way you said it as well as like in the start when you just had like less experience. The way I always like describe that our mind is, I used to be obsessed with going to the gym, and there's that moment when you pick up a larger set of dumbbells and you just can't lift them. And you're like, okay, I'm not ready for that then. And then eventually you'll pick them up and you just get one rep out. And as soon as that one rep's done, it like unlocks it in your mind where you're like, okay, I'm confident that I can pick those up and I can do more.
Yeah.
And that's kind of similar with business, I find. Like if you've done one deal, you could do 1,000 deals, whether it's $10,000 on the line, whether it's $1 million on the line. And I think it's very similar once you have your craft, which it sounds like from an early stage, you had a very good path from that craft through the law. So before we go too far into it, I do want to hear about the start. So just give the audience a little bit of background as to coming straight, because you went straight from law school into starting the Kinetic Group pretty much, right? If I'm
pretty
not mistaken.
closely, yeah. So
tell me about what the Kinetic Group is and what the origins were for you and where that idea came from.
Sure. So the Kinetic Group nowadays in 2024, right? the core functions, service, and platform that we try to provide to clients is talent management, right? Talent management, brand management, I would say, is kind of how we've broadened out, still focusing primarily on servicing talent and content creators, but brand management because now it's expanded to the scope of, okay, like you as a content creator, live streamer can have a bigger brand that extends beyond just what you do on Twitch or Kick or YouTube Live. How do we grow and develop and extend that? Or for, companies, brands who are looking to enter into that space and work with talent, right? We can be a connector to those things.
Like a guide almost. And I imagine that's a lot of what you had to do at the start when this industry didn't really exist. And you try to bring in these brands that are like, what's gaming?
Yeah, it was and still is very educational, right? Being able to set the table is something that's critically important for our business and for me personally, right? Like focusing again on the core offering and the priority being, am I or can I be of service, right? That's the number one priority to me in just personally, right? To friends, family, loved ones, and then extending that into my business and professional life through the company. And so I found the opportunity, was granted the opportunity, not directly out of law school, but during law school, one of my mentors who went to the law school that I was attending was a manager and did licensing deals for a couple NFL athletes who lived in San Diego area. And so he brought me in, allowed me to kind of shadow him and then, help craft because I was a young guy, social media, Instagram, help with that, right? At the time, right, especially as someone green and inexperienced, anything that you can get your hands on, anything that I could get my hands on to look and feel and experience, dove into it. And so I got that opportunity because those athletes were interested in building their brand, wanted to do brand deals. So I would go and have to sniff around and dial for dollars while also trying to figure out the content side and, finish getting my law degree in classes. But got my law degree, started working for an NBA franchise. What I found, right, consistently over the course of this time that when I would have these interactions with athletes, they all, when we've heard the cliche so many times over the past few years, athletes want to be gamers, gamers want to be athletes. I had no exposure to gaming from a professional or career perspective. I, grew up playing a ton of sports games. And so that's how I was able to recognize a lot of the athletes and make those connections. But in terms of esports, I didn't know it was a thing.
And what year was this roughly?
This was 2017.
Okay, so it's out there.
I was still in the back of my mind considering what it meant or what it would look like to become a sports agent or practice law. It was never really until there was just so much conversation and excitement around the athletes that I would interact with wanting to be gamers.
Wow.
That I was like, okay, let me go away for a bit, find out what the hell you're talking about and why. And I just gravitated towards staying in that space once I made my entrance into it because I had the attention and could be of service more consistently. And I was more valuable to that subset of clients because they gave me 24 hours, 365 days. It wasn't just a compressed timeline of, hey, in my off season over these 2 months out of the 12, I need you to bring me, $8 million in brand deals and grow my audience. There's not enough time, energy, or resource to really have an impact or feel like I was doing something fulfilling. And so kind of moved away from working with athletes because of that experience and that exposure to, kind of organically being pushed into the space, so to speak.
Yeah. So that's an interesting origin because and a point that you made is that gamers want to be athletes, athletes want to be gamers. I was fortunate enough to work on a shoot with LeBron when the new college football game came out. He wanted to be the first person to play it. And we met him in the Bellagio in some suite and gave him the game. And he was due to play it for 40 minutes. It was a low-key thing. He wanted no production. We set up some cameras, and then we hid in one of the bedrooms as he played. And we ended up being held hostage by LeBron for 2.5 hours. He couldn't get off this game.
Yeah.
He was obsessed with it. And we were pulling it apart afterwards, and we were speaking with one of his like management team. And we were like, what is it with athletes and gamers, do you think? Like, why do they all do it? And he said it's because these guys are professional athletes in basketball or whatever. They're not allowed to go and scratch that competitive itch in skiing, in football. They're not allowed to play other sports because they're so valuable to their teams that it's contractually written. It's like, don't do it. How can we convince them to just sit still for 8 hours and get that competitive itch scratched? And gaming became the answer for a lot of them, because you can go online, you can compete with everyone in the world, and you can get ultra competitive while sitting still, icing your injuries, and just chilling. And I think that's where a lot of that comes from. Would you agree, or have any other takes as to why athletes and gamers cross-pollinate so much?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. When you think about, an athlete's mindset, and even as applied to some of the biggest and most popular personalities, whether it be streamers or esports players, right? It's all rooted in competition. And just the forum and the venue and the field varies, right? But they all just want to compete and test their skill set, test their boundaries. I think additionally, when it comes to athletes and their interest in video games, right? It's, being able to apply some of that competitive spirit in more casual settings, right? I think I saw the other day, like LeBron's game day routine. He goes from like 7:30 a.m. all the way to the end of the game at like 10 p.m. Pacific. So it's a whole marathon of a day. And, with gaming, right, you can still scratch that competitive itch, but obviously a lot less physically demanding. So I think it's all just about, being able to test your boundaries, being able to feel that thing, right?
Yeah.
Depending on who you're talking to, right? That thing could be poker, could be could be golf, right? But just to be able to test your boundaries and kind of get some of that, also that immediate feedback loop, is one of, if not the most unique elements of this whole live stream culture and community.
Yeah.
Whereas, for athletes, you play the game and you might see some of the chirps online, but you don't get that immediate feedback loop in real time like you do in gaming or online.
And even the way I was playing Fortnite the other night with Matty from Zone, and we played 2 games. We were crushing it, and we got a win in the second game. And he was like, "I've got to bail," and I'm like, "You can't leave on a win." That's my perspective. But he was like, "I'm out." And he texted me after, saying, "My heart rate's so high right now. Like, I'm trying to zone down." And it's true, because the catharsis you get when you kill someone, the sound effects, the feeling, the vibrations of the controller, like, it's all built to give you these rushes. And it's something that, like, yeah, you can score a goal in soccer and football, and if you don't have like that huge crowd, the feedback loop's like not quite as dialed or as intense as when you're gaming sometimes. Yeah. And you said something that I wasn't even considering digging into this, but it's such a good insight. LeBron doing his 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. work day when he's got a game. Does Diaz Biffle do a similar sort of thing? Or is he just, I'm the best Warzone player in the world, I'm going to wake up, I've got a tournament, and for 2 minutes, I'm going to jump on the PC?
Diaz is the most impressive, frustrating. Diaz brings up all the emotions for me as a manager, and Chewy, who does most of the heavy lifting with Diaz, can probably speak to this even better than I can. But he's so impressive and frustrating and makes me feel so emotional because it's natural. Like, I know he puts in work. I know he's diligent about honing in his craft. But I've also known and seen and heard him roll out of bed and just win a $25,000 tournament because he could.
In his setups in his room?
Yeah. Very casual.
That's amazing.
So he's great. And I'm sure now, especially, right, back-to-back World Series of Warzone championships, Esports World Cup, he's the best in the world at his craft. And I think that's one of the even more impressive is that he's continued to dial in how to stay at the top, what motivates him, what keeps him invested in continuing to compete at a high level. And thankfully, he decided to continue to compete and not retire at 22. That would have been sad.
I want to dive into that a lot, but that's I took it away. My bad on the inception of the Connect group. So you're in the world of basketball, talent management, and traditional sports, and all of these guys are asking you about gaming and esports and bringing them deals. How did that then transpire over to you starting your own agency?
Yeah, so I went away. I got my law degree and moved back to LA. I had the opportunity to continue working with that NBA team, but I just didn't feel right. Like I was having the type of impact or felt the level of fulfillment that I really wanted to at that point. I know it was early in my career, but I just felt like sports will always be there, will always be a part of my life. It's just not something where I found myself building and developing and being of service. And so because I was just pushed into gaming and digital and YouTube, I found a firm that was hiring some lower level coordinator position, and here I am with my law degree and studying for the bar exam, kind of just going through the motions, thinking, okay, I passed the bar, great. I'll practice law, but I don't really care to, right? This is a space I'm intrigued by. Feels like there's an opportunity where there's white space, right? Yeah. There's opportunity where I can carve out my niche and see how it can be of service and impact. And the firm that I interviewed with was managing massive YouTubers and content creators, including Nadeshot,
right?
On the 100 Thieves side. And so I wasn't even interviewing necessarily with a thought of him in particular or gaming. I just wanted to get introduced to the digital space, and with a long-term goal of getting introduced into gaming. And that was one of my first opportunities, is working on his team. I wasn't the lead. I wasn't even the second on the team, but I was just doing what I could to be valuable. And thankfully, Matt is a huge basketball fan. Right. At the time, he was a big Lonzo Ball fan, and he followed the Lakers. He was an LA guy. And, that's how I initially made my connection with him and to him personally, was just being able to speak that language, being literally the only person in the office that could have extended conversations with him about Lonzo Ball and sports and basketball. So, I'm grateful. I'm thankful for the law degree experience, right? Because it taught me preparation. It taught me how to carry myself professionally. And then the background in sports just allowed me to have that, that feather in my cap, so to speak, to be able to more comfortably approach and have conversations with people that, generally speaking, I had no connection to, right? Absent that little nugget. And it opened so many more doors, and we can get into kind of the further, 'cause I don't think I've shared kind of the specifics as to like how I got connected to Nick and started the Connect group, but it was through that, right? That firm.
So that was while you were working directly with Nature. What year was this roughly?
This was 2018. So got the law degree.
100 Thieves will have been.
This was early days. This was when they were preparing to enter the LCS.
LCS, and we was doing the vlogs.
And the CS team, and they were exploring some Brazilian team.
Okay, because LCS was that league was the first team that they got, right? As a company,
I believe so.
Because I was watching his vlogs out of the gate, like when the YouTube, I was quite sheltered. I used to game all the time. I was quite sheltered when it came to like the industry. I had no idea what was going on behind the scenes. I worked a hospitality gig, and I was like working all the time, weekends, 80-hour weeks. It was chaos. So I didn't really have much time to sit and consume YouTube. And I remember pulling up YouTube one day to probably search for something specific, and it's like, I started a company in gaming. And I was like, what the fuck's this? And it was Nadeshot. And from that point on, he's always been like my North Star inspiration. Like, okay, I can genuinely say like he's a big part of how I got into gaming.
Yeah.
So I was curious as to what point it was for you when you started working with him. And
I came on the team And I maybe it was a combination of the fact that I had the legal background and I had some experience in working with a proper sports franchise. That I thought, hey, we can Frankenstein this, and you could probably be helpful in some way to preparing the LCS application and that whole opportunity that we're working on. And so, yeah, it was just thrust into helping with that. I don't know the extent to which I was actually helpful, but spent a good amount of time at that firm. I was there for a little less than a year. Matt and that firm introduced me to Nick,
Right.
who Matt brought to LA to help be foundational to the organization. And Nick and I like really hit it off just personally. Both big sports fans. And he was at a point in his career where, he knew that there was an opportunity. He just hadn't yet cracked the code as to where he was already doing numbers. Don't get me wrong, but it really was a situation, an opportunity where how do we make these numbers mean something to the broader audience or brand partners or more commercially, right? You're doing 15,000 concurrents, which is huge, especially in 2018, and doing crazy numbers on YouTube. But who cares?
Yeah.
Right?
What does it mean if you can't take that kinetic energy and pass it on?
Yeah, I like that, kinetic energy.
I've always used that term. I've never linked it to like the kinetic group. Actually,
that was an important element of kind of the origin of the company and the brand name, right? Because there was such an eclectic combination of different interests, passions, and aspirations personally, right? Whether it be law, sports, gaming, I didn't want to create something that was pigeonholed into any particular vertical or functionality or service, right? Kinetic being something that is malleable, that is, energy, which is valuable and available, but not gaming, sports, events, or anything in particular, right? We'll wear whatever hat so long as it is something that people can appreciate, right? Yeah. So being of service and then being able to align on how valuable that service is, those two elements were foundational, right? And for Nick at the time when I finally got introduced to him, he found the value in me being able to help him in figuring out, right, is this a business or can we turn it into a bigger business? At the time, I started to build up a little bit of a book at that firm and was doing a lot of great work and had a lot of fun with other clients outside of gaming. Fashion, beauty, lifestyle. I was selling diaper deals and putting together makeup collaborations, right? I was enjoying it for sure. And I loved being in a position and having an opportunity to help find and create success for those clients. Personally, wasn't my jam, right?
Yeah.
But it felt good and allowed me to cut my teeth to figure out what are the processes, right? What are the paths and how do you go about building a business and a portfolio, being able to then apply it to Nick was something that was critically important.
During that time, I know you just mentioned that you're doing diaper deals, things like that.
Yeah.
What was the strangest product you brought to life with one of your current creators or with a deal in the past? Because I know at one point I swear I saw that you guys did was it the M Farm? You did a beer tap or something along those lines?
We did. So it wasn't a beer tap, but we had at a TwitchCon, I believe it was 2022 in San Diego. We took over a whole bar and we had a lot of different elements. There was like a Nick branded or MFAM branded beer.
That was it.
And so, we did the whole thing. That wasn't a product that we brought to life necessarily, but it was a part of the whole experience, right? To have a MFAM or Nick beer.
But that got me thinking, and I saw that. I was like, I wonder what the weirdest thing you guys have made in collaboration with somebody is.
I wouldn't say, maybe for me it was the weirdest or at least the most foreign, right? Because it's not a part of my daily routine necessarily, but it ended up being a product that my wife until maybe a couple months ago was still using after 4, 5, 6 years. But there was this makeup bag. It was a travel bag that we did Dulce Candy. She's a great creator that we worked with, that I got a chance to work with in 2018. It was like, it's a roll-up bag, travel, you put all your makeup, it's a mirror, you hang it up on your door, and it sold so well, really successful. And, it's just funny, like going through that process, and even now, I find so much enjoyment, and I really take a lot of pride in being in a position where, one, I'm trusted to go through some of the R&D process, but then to explore and hear some of the stories and identify where there is utility, where there's opportunity to create something to make someone's life easier, or to allow for a process to run more smoothly or effectively or efficiently, whether it be their morning routine or something in their professional life, right? But being a part of that project was instructive, right? It was formative, and it's a part of the process that is so critically important for any creator, anyone in entertainment, right? To still be as open-minded as possible for as long as you can about how you're catering to your audience, but then also to yourself, right? To continue to stay motivated and incentivized to keep doing the thing, whatever that may be, right? How you define the thing can change from day to day, week to week, but to take inventory of that and to really have the level of self-awareness to know why you're doing it is critically important. Otherwise, you kind of get lost in just the daily routine, and it becomes a chore and a task and a job.
It's interesting that you say that, because with this podcast, like, we're trying to get on as many people that myself and Evan personally identify as like successful in different measures and however you want to measure that. And one of the common threads that we're always coming back to with these guests is like, service other people. As long as what you're doing is going to help others, but also services yourself. Don't do something inauthentic. Make sure it's authentic to you. You're passionate about that particular field, but make sure it does help others. That's a common thread that's always coming back. So I'm glad to hear that that's your approach to talent management, because ultimately, that's, as a talent manager, that you're there for the talent, right? And it can be very lucrative. But I think your approach of service, talent first, what can you do for them and what can you do for their audience? It's always going to reap the rewards when you're playing that long tail game, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. And being intentional about how you spend that time and resources is critically important throughout the entire journey, right? Like maintaining and prioritizing service for sure, and making sure you're aligned on the value is critically important, but to what end?
Yeah.
It's a part of what we think about and talk about now, right? Not just with Nick, but with a lot of the other, emerging talent. We have a whole, emerging talent division where we're servicing those that are still very much up and coming, are stars in their own right, but aspire to be even bigger and better. And we put in as much of the same energy and resource allocation to them as we do, the massive superstars in the space, but all being rooted in, okay, we're doing this because that. We're not just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. This opportunity, everyone's window is finite, right? So let's be very aggressive. Let's be very thoughtful, but also make sure we're doing things for a purpose. It may not yield the most amount of dollars or the most amount of views, but is it giving us the tools and information and insight that we need to do things bigger or better or learn from them?
And do it forever.
Right.
Because that's the ideal. If you're finding something you love.
Or to have the optionality to be able to do it forever or pivot out.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's something that I've always prided myself in as a business owner, as an entrepreneur. Never really striving for, I want to make X amount of dollars, or I need to have X amount of clients. But can we do enough good work for enough people that we have the option and opportunity to be more selective and to be thoughtful, or to take swings and try different avenues that maybe are outside of our wheelhouse, but we're given that opportunity because we built that trust and reputation more broadly within our network or out of our network.
And when you started, like, I know you mentioned, obviously, you were introduced to Nick via Nadeshot. How quickly did that become, okay, I can do it, I can start a business just around this one person? Is that what that was? Is that where the Kinetic Group began? Because I know we mentioned you took on a bit of investment in the early days to allow you to have the time to be able to work on it out of the gate. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, little as it got, but I'll say the super short version of it in terms of the inception of the company. I was kind of put in a tough spot with having to choose. I was at a crossroads, right? A little less than a year there at the company. Nadeshot is a client. The firm is servicing and supporting 100 Thieves as an organization. Nick is a part of that organization. And he was also a client who I was given the opportunity to take on more of a hands-on kind of lead role. And there really wasn't a ton of expectation there from him, right? Because he's such a massive and polarizing and outspoken personality, right? Didn't then lend super well to being a commercial brand. So like, okay, have at it. See what you can do. Good luck. Have fun. And so I did it. I worked my ass off, got to a point where we started making some money, built enough trust from Nick that he kind of came to me and gave me the opportunity. He's like, look, I know you've got, these clients over here and you're doing your fashion, beauty, and makeup stuff, right? He's like, I want more of your time. So, come in kind of full-time in-house or, start your own company, focus on the gaming thing because it seems like you are starting to figure out what it is that you're doing, and I'll be your first client. And so that was kind of the inception of it, right? It's like, okay, I'd build up enough respect and trust and credibility from him that, he gave me that leeway. Yeah. And I didn't know, I didn't aspire to build my own company. I just wanted to find a place where I can be helpful and useful. But it all kind of bubbled up, right place, right time. And for me, it was like at my previous employer, they wanted everyone to win and succeed, but they were motivated to make sure 100 Thieves was doing well more broadly as an organization. So I was conflicted with stay here and be an employee, service a broader clientele, which is prioritizing 100 Thieves as an org, or service the talent who at the time, and it's well documented, right, was struggling with being appreciated for the value he was giving to the organization. Yeah. So how can I full-throatedly advocate for this talent client while I'm being charged by my employer to support the organization? I couldn't really do either as well as I really wanted to, so I had to pick and choose. And thankfully, Nick gave me the opportunity to choose him, right? Or to choose myself in terms of being able to focus on providing the most service to one particular task or client or opportunity.
Do you remember that decision being an easy one to make, or were you pretty torn? Because that's a leap of faith to an extent as well.
It was an easy one only because he really believed in me, and vice versa. I really felt strongly about his ability to execute and deliver, and for us to collaborate really well together to build whatever the hell it could or was supposed to be. Yeah. Zooming out a little bit, I was 2 months away from my wedding date.
Okay, wow.
And I had, relatively speaking, just gotten to the company. I was there for 7-8 months. Yeah. And then this conversation kind of fell into my lap where it's like, okay, can I literally or figuratively afford to take this leap when I just got here? But I didn't blink, and thankfully, the MVP of this whole ordeal was my then fiance, now wife, who, just fully supported. She's okay, I trust you. And so, quit my job there. Started the Kinetic, and Nick was our first client. And out the gate, it wasn't, guns a-blazing, massively successful, right? Through a family friend, I got a $25,000 loan, most of which I used to bring myself and at the time 2 of my co-founders with me to PAX West on a road trip to go to the first convention as the Kinetic Group. in support of Nick, where he competed at this massive Fortnite event. We made the rounds, and that was it. From there, it was kind of full steam ahead, and it all snowballed into what it is today. But
did you land any deals at that particular event?
No deals.
No deals?
No deals at all. But Nick did his job. He showed up, had a massive showing, and being in that environment, in the crowd, and also making the rounds, right? Making the introductions, kind of sharing what we were trying to provide and do in support of his brand and business was instructive, right? It was motivating. It was inspiring. It made me feel like I was in the right place at the right time and with people that were duly motivated to make the most of that opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was, I really didn't second guess leaving that job or post, because I had the trust and I trusted in Nick that he would really commit to it. And that's a critical component even now in the ethos of our company and how we onboard and recruit new talent as partners to manage and represent is, do we trust mutually in the commitment to one another that we're going to grow and build, or at least try to do things above and beyond what you could otherwise do on your own, right? Everyone has different wants and needs and goals and aspirations, but are you at least going to give yourself the chance to see if you can reach them or not, and empower us to help in support of that? And he gave us that. He gave me that, and connected me thereafter to all the things that we've been able to accomplish now.
All right, first time ever, I'm interrupting the podcast to tell you about some Millhouse products. This is exciting. We've got 3 new products out right now that are going to elevate your gaming station. The whole idea is that we want the feng shui increase to go up. So your spouse or partner isn't going to come into your gaming room and be like, why does it smell like shit? Or why is your controller slung around? It's all purposeful space for the controller so you can put it down, go play the game of life, and then know that when you come back, it's going to be in that same spot where it's designated for. You've got a candle to go with it so that your gaming station smells lovely. It's all made of ceramic with cork bases, so when you put it down, it doesn't make those chaos noises, and it feels premium because it is premium. Second piece I've got with me right now is the marble headphone stand. These are all numbered 1 to 50. We've got 50 red and 50 green, but they're all individually unique. You take your headphones off, you got that ashtray at the base there where you'll put some incense that we will send in the packaging, or you can smoke your joint, whatever it is that you want to do, all while increasing the feng shui of that setup with high quality finished aluminium as the frame and that marble base. Again, we're going to have 50 of these in the red, 50 in the green. When they're gone, we will not be running the same item again. They'll be gone. So if you do want to check those out, head over to www.millhouse.gg. But for now, back to the podcast. To any talent managers out there right now listening, or aspiring talent managers out there, that conversation that you have with Nick, where it's like sitting down being like, right, are we in this together? What's your commitment? This is my commitment. How do those conversations usually go? And you got any advice for anyone in that position to make those jumps? Because a lot of the time, if you're working for a larger talent agency as a talent manager, you might just be going with the flow. You might just be going off what somebody else has taught you. What would you teach to these guys when it is making that connection?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because it's all situational, right? I think there was a certain level, I'll say, speaking for myself, there was a certain level of desperation in the time and place and the setting where I knew that there was something to be done that I could help have a significant impact in potentially in the space. And I was surrounded by people who similarly had that itch and feeling that provided me with their trust. And I would say, so long as there's alignment on and transparency behind, okay, what it is that we're doing collectively, where is that time and energy and resources going to build towards? I think that's the best piece of advice that I could give anyone starting a business, whether it be in talent representation or otherwise, right? Really being intentional and aggressive about what the hell it is you're actually doing, especially as a business owner and entrepreneur. And you know this yourself as well, right? There's no time to it's a waste.
Yeah.
And that timeline, that window is even more truncated in the digital ecosystem and in live streaming, because it's all just, so quickly consumed daily, and there's all kinds of new trends and a different meta every week, that you can't really stew on the perfect product or the perfect idea. You just got to do, but really be really intentional, be really committed to whatever that is, and to fail fast, right?
Yeah.
That's something that I've learned from a lot of different folks that I've met, really successful and unsuccessful, right? Entrepreneurs, who at least I can appreciate and respect the fact that they committed to a thing and saw and found out that, okay, this has some legs or it doesn't, but at least we're not dwelling in the coulda, woulda, shouldas.
Yeah.
Let's just do it and really see it through.
Yeah, that's advice I always love to give myself as well. As from my side, like I had a fiance, had a house together, we were together for 13, 14 years. I was in a job I hated, and I used to always think like, what if I was going to go live in LA and start my own company and so on and so forth. And then eventually I was just like, you got to go and fucking do it, because if you don't, you're going to hit 80 and regret. And I heard Gary Vee say that once. And he's like, the only thing I'm scared of is being 80 years old and regretting any aspect of my life. And I was like, fuck, that's such a good way of looking at it. And that changed my whole thing. I was like, I've got to try it. And even if it's a failure, you're fine. You live with that failure because you're going to learn from it and you move on. Yeah. And it took me a while to realize. I didn't learn that till I was like late 20s. It's a very good piece of advice.
Yeah, it's important. Yeah. It's important. I mean, and that's, I think, one of the saving graces, one of the things that I've grown more and more to love and enjoy and appreciate about this digital space and the live stream ecosystem is that as cutthroat and as much of a rapid breakneck pace that this space moves, you're afforded the luxury of, generally speaking, people forgetting about some of the missteps, because it just ends up getting buried in the consistent cycle of things, right? Yeah. So try and fail and learn, but always do that. Yeah, it's important. You need to get that.
That'll be good. We're just shooting. You're good. We need a sign. We need a sign that says live. We're live now. We're failing. We've just failed right there.
It's all good. It's all good.
So there's something that you said that I wanted to read, and I'm paraphrasing this a little bit, but the quote roughly went in your 2020 interview with David Meltzer. I know you mentioned you've had a couple of mentors throughout the years. If you have anything to want to touch on with that, because I know that's very important for a lot of people listening. If you don't have a mentor, seek one out. If you can't find one physically, find one digitally that you can like listen to and consume. But you said in that interview, you're like, right, there's an opportunity to make money in gaming right now, but we're not sure what that means in terms of sustainable revenue. That was in 2020. What's your take now in 2024, and where is that sustainable revenue, if at all it has become stable?
I don't know if sustainable and gaming go in the same sentence, especially now. That interview was great. I still haven't had a chance to listen back to that after having recorded. I was so nervous in that because, one, it was my first podcast, and two, to your note about the mentorship, like Dave Meltzer was and is someone that I've always looked up to, have reached out, have had multiple conversations with prior to the podcast, just because of his business acumen, his professionalism, and the influence that he has had on me in terms of building my business, but then also being, and I steal this from him all the time, being consistent and persistent in pursuing whatever it is that you're aspiring to do or build. That's critically important. And so, I would say to that end, to answer your question about have we cracked the code about sustainability in esports, I don't know. I would say no. Yeah. The short answer. I think a lot of the support, or I know a lot of the support from the outside, venture capital world has kind of fizzled out a bit. There's still a healthy amount of support if you go in the right places, in the right pockets, and find people that are genuinely passionate and interested in gaming and in the gaming community. Yeah. But I think we're still trying to figure out, right, what it means. Is there a sustainable way to approach building the business around gaming and esports, or is this more a community event, a pastime, right? That can be fun. You can bring in big names and brands. Sustainable? I don't know. At the time, that interview was in 2020, and if I think back, esports orgs were all the rage, right? And so you had venture capital money coming in.
It was COVID.
Funding and supporting esports orgs, COVID, so everyone was inside.
Viewership through the
watching
roof.
content. We had athletes, artists, musicians from every crevice and corner of the world claiming that they were massive gamers and big fans of insert client's name here, would love to hop on stream with him or her and create content. And so at that time, I think a lot of my hesitation was motivated by, are all these people going to continue to bang on my door looking to work together and collaborate and connect with this client or that client? I would say it's definitely fizzled out for sure, but rightfully so. And I'm not mad at it because I think in a lot of ways it's filtered out a lot of the fluff and a lot of folks that maybe weren't here with the right purpose or intention, going back to what we're rooted in, what I'm personally motivated by is being of service and providing value. For a lot of folks, it was a cash grab, and they probably made a lot of money getting in and out. Good for them, right?
But I think that cash grab overinflated a lot of companies. You know, we saw what happened with FaZe. We saw how fast they grew, and they IPO'd, and ultimately that was the demise of the company, and probably for the best when you look at it now, because they're in a position now where it's exciting again.
Yeah,
and it's back.
I think glass half full perspective. Everything happened the way it should have or needed to, right? When you think about opportunities or ventures within broader entertainment and applying some of the cyclical nature of how things go up and down within gaming, right? It needed that moment of plateauing to where all the enthusiasm in the world, all support, all the money, commercial success, and then, you know, to go on a downward trajectory really compelled and obligated all of us, myself included, to be more thoughtful, to be more creative, right? If you don't have all the support and the safety net of all these brand dollars and venture capital behind you, now you have to actually provide value, create compelling content, be able to produce really entertaining shows and concepts and events, and not just say, we're in gaming, we're on Twitch, so you could be here too, right? That was, if there was ever a time for anyone to make money, it was then in 2018 and 2019. What are you doing in 2024? And it may not be about necessarily making money, but what is the impact you are actually having in the space without all the bright lights and bells and whistles that were previously there?
You guys are one of the few, if not one of the only, that are consistently trying to push their creators to do bigger brand activations. You know, you got the M-Fam, you got the Backer Bros tournament, the Wonderland. That's actually the first time I was ever introduced to the Kinetic Group. Was I attended the Vegas Wonderland. First time I met Lucky, first time I met Repulse, first time I met Chewy. First, I actually meet Diaz, very quiet. He's extremely quiet. And I don't think I actually managed to speak with him, but Lucky was there doing the show running, introducing himself to everybody. I ended up sat at dinner in Catch, I believe it was, in the Aria. I was sat next to Max Holloway. Unbeknownst to me who he was, I thought he was a COD player. And there's a fun, quick story, actually. I was sat with Aiden, who I knew, thought he was awesome. And we went to Hakkasan that night, I believe it was. And I was with Max during dinner. We traveled over to Hakkasan together. We had Aiden in tow as well. And Aiden had just purchased a full Louis Vuitton outfit, shorts.
With the shorts.
Shorts and shirt. And we're in this queue to get in. I'm stood with these guys, and everyone in the casino is coming up to Max, being like, "Yo, like, can I get a picture?" And I'm like, "All right, Aiden's just here. Like, why? He wasn't very good at COD. Why do you want a picture with him?" I thought he was a COD pro. And next thing, someone comes up and he goes to Alyssa, who's Max's wife, and goes to Alyssa, "How does it feel watching him get beaten up all the time?" And she's like, "Yeah, it's his job. Like, whatever." And then he went, and I was sat there. What does he mean by that? I mean, why would he care about you getting beaten up? And he's like, "I'm a UFC fighter." I was like, what? He was like, yeah, that's my job. I'm like 2-time world champion UFC fighter. I was like, oh, fuck. I'm sitting here thinking, why do people not want a picture with Aiden? And then to finish the story off, we get to the front of the queue and the guy looks at Aiden. He's like, you're not coming in that outfit, dude. He's like, what do you mean? I've just spent $1,000 in this outfit. And he's like, yeah, you're not allowed to wear shorts, dude. So he went up to some guy at the tables and was like, I've just bought these shorts. They're worth like $500. Can I have your trousers and you have these shorts? And he was like, okay. I think that's where it went. They did the switch, but that was my first introduction to your company.
I love it.
And that was one of your events that you guys put on. Where did those events come from, and what's your philosophy and ethos with them?
Yeah, I mean, you that anecdote about Max and Aiden is kind of the epitome of a lot of the motivation behind some of these events that we've produced and invested in for and with our talent, right? It's meant to be an extension and a showcase of the communities that each of these respective streamers have built, right? And to extend that connection and that community above and beyond the live stream. For some talent, they're motivated and believe in extending and broadening that reach and connectivity to their fans and audiences. So to be able to bring in Max alongside Aiden to showcase the range and the impact that community has, not just gaming more broadly, but, the Baka's event, right? And the Baka community, and to showcase that a top tier athlete like Max, right? One of the best in the world at his craft, is going to spend that time to compete and be around and even go to the club with these gamers, these streamers in their community. It showcases the strength and impact of who they are and what they do, and how their impact goes above and beyond just competing in any particular esport. And so that's a big motivation behind it, is really being able to showcase the strength and breadth of what it is that they're doing and who they are. But also, too, it's informative and instructive to really figure out and experiment, right? What are the things that, one, that talent is really interested in doing, and where do they like being outside of their home stream setup, and where does their audience want to go with them? What do they want to experience too, aside from the everyday viewer experience and perspective? So when we've done things like Baka Wonderland in Las Vegas, we've been able to see, okay, does the Baka audience like to travel to the West Coast? How much do they enjoy the gambling stuff? How much are they interested in the UFC? When we've done the gaming events in partnership with the UFC and have had Nick headline, and we've brought in a Scump or a Tim the Tatman, okay, what type of audience crossover is there between Nick's audience and Scump's audience, Nick's audience and Tim? How do we build out the rest of this talent roster? Which other personalities have a good rapport and good chemistry on camera with Nick and the rest of our roster? All of these things, whether we showcase them as transparently as we, want to, or present it as a marketing lever, these are all different wrinkles that are all informative and experiments, and really trying to just gather as much data and insights, again, for the purpose of building broader brand and broader business. And then somewhere down the line, it's about money and commercial success and brand partnership. But that's always been, I wouldn't even say a secondary consideration, tertiary, somewhere down the line. If we're doing all the other things really well and we're dialed in and motivated and believe in what we're doing, it has always been the case, thankfully, that the money has worked itself out. And so that's why we've always been so aggressive, so intentional around events, is because it's just so valuable to gain that information and insight about the client, but then the community as well.
If you were to just remove the events and put it as this is just one business entity, is that making profit, or is it a loss center to surplus the others?
No, it's a great question. It depends on the talent, right? Because we're not going to necessarily invest the same dollars or the same dollars into every event for every talent. Nick, for example, has done an entire baseball stadium, right? 15,000 people coming to Tampa, Florida in the middle of COVID to spend a whole day with him. And it was huge. Massive commercial success, a bunch of brands behind it. Fans traveled in from all around the world. We've also taken a lot of pride and had a lot of success in doing an event like Bacca Carne during a CDL Champs weekend where it was a bar takeover.
Yeah.
Right? So much smaller in scale, but similarly successful from the perspective of, did we bring together the people that we wanted to? Did we gain the insights? Did we provide them with some layer of an experience that was an extension of what they otherwise could or would have done from home? And does this more holistically round out or strengthen the relationship between the streamer and his audience or her audience? That's always the most critical component of all of these things. Our ability to sell them commercially has been varied, right? From time to time, depending upon which cycle of the esports landscape we're in. It's all varied. I would say at the end of the day, truthfully, every event that we've produced has been a success.
Yeah.
Because we've gotten the buy-in from talent to believe and commit in executing on these ideas. And for the most part, from its inception all the way to the day of, we've executed on that vision and then gained the insights that we wanted.
The reason I ask is because, as I'm sitting here listening to you in more detail, it's like you're a risk taker and in the best way. And I think for a lot of brands and companies that exist in esports, they are missing a lot of that element sometimes. And it's like the ability to invest in what could be a loss center for the entire business, but it's going to bring profit more so to the profit centers. It was something I learned a long time ago. I used to work at like what you guys would call country clubs out here. And, they've got hotel, wedding facilities, bars, restaurants, spas, and golf courses. And golf course stereotypically is a loss center for a business. It loses $500,000 a year up to sometimes, especially if you've got two or 250,000. I think the one I worked at was losing, but it was always that services the rest. By having that golf club there's some husbands that are going to be like, oh, we're going to go do a trip down there, and the wives will come along and spend all of the money in spa treatments in the real profit centers where the huge margins are made and covers the loss of the golf course, right? And I wasn't sure if that was what these events were, and potentially why a lot of companies don't do it, because on surface level, no risk taking, it's like, that's going to lose us money. And they don't see the bigger picture that you clearly can see when you're approaching these things. And I think it's because you have that why, you're servicing talent and the community as a whole. And it doesn't matter whether it makes money indirectly or directly for the one-off things, as long as the whole machine works. That's good. And I respect that. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, it's important. From a sheer revenue perspective, we've never been in the red on an event that we produced.
Oh, fuck yeah.
So
that's awesome.
Don't get me wrong. I still run a business, and and we're very intentional about the amount of funds and resources we put into these things, and make sure that we squeeze all the value that we can into each dollar we put into these events, whether they're fully backed by sponsors or, the talent themselves invest in them, right? Yeah. So that we have that mutual buy-in. The biggest win, kind of to your point, in parallel to like country clubs and golf clubs and other venues, right, is what is the value that you can extract above and beyond the payday?
Yeah.
Right? And is that more valuable than just the P&L? In every instance, in every conversation throughout the course of running the Kinetic Group, never prioritized the dollar amount necessarily. Even when it comes to things like sponsorships, and my approach and philosophy that we've tried to instill with talent and the rest of my team on the management side is a sponsorship opportunity is effectively a paid pilot for you to experiment with a different format, a different game, to test your level of sensitivity and boundaries to this different format and stream, but also your audience's interest and excitement and appetite for this different genre or this different title at little to no risk, right? You're going to get some noise in the chat about this isn't Fortnite or go back to COD or sell out. But
but it's forgotten the next day.
It's forgotten the next day. Most importantly, right? What is it? Is this a format that you can replicate or iterate around in the future with this brand or not, right? Or is this a title that, for whatever reason, has picked up some traction? Really, you've assuaged the risk because this brand is funding this pilot episode.
That's a brilliant way,
right? And similarly, it helps round out your portfolio in a way where you're not pigeonholed to just being this or that. It showcases your ability to be put in a new and uncomfortable situation, and the fact that you're able to still entertain, to still produce and compete at a high level, right? So those are the things that we prioritize. Of course, you got to extract X amount of dollars to make sure that screen time is valued appropriately, and we always do.
Yeah.
But it's because we prioritize all the other things first.
Brilliant. And I think we've got a really good like roundabout understanding now of why the Kinetic Group is successful, why you're working with talent like Nick Mercs and SypherPK, and you have the ability to rise these guys to the top. And I'm not taking any credit away from their creative ability and their showmanship to actually rise up themselves, but it's a two-man show. You know, it takes two to tango. They need good management structure behind them, which you clearly provide. The problem with that is when they get to the top, they're under a microscope. You know, in the world of the internet right now, anything you say and do will be held against you on Twitter.
That's right. That's right.
It's live, and the kids are out for blood a lot of the time. Nick Mercs in particular, it's impossible to chat to you without going into the controversial things that he said, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not here to be the judge at all, but I have to ask about them. You know, when you're managing someone like Nick and you see that he's been banned on Twitch, tell me a little bit about how that makes you feel, first of all, how you deal with that, and behind the scenes, what goes on in those scenarios.
How that makes me feel is a tricky one. Because, I mean, there's, as we've already spoken about, right? There's has been such a level of trust and personal connection with Nick that extends above and beyond the business aspect of it, right? And so he and I have always had such a great relationship in terms of communication prior to things going live or being produced in terms of content. You know, the Twitch ban that you're referring to is one of those instances where there wasn't a conversation prior to about what was going to be said, and it's never been the case. I never have, nor never will I attempt to censor or muzzle a client, right? My job, the service that I provide, and the support that we give is to empower these creators to utilize their platform as broadly as possible. How did it make me feel? It was frustrating. I wouldn't necessarily say surprising by any means, right? But at the same token, it came from a place and was on the heels of, you know, a more consistent exploration and process that Nick has gone through or is going through in terms of what he cares about, what he's learning, how he's feeling, and the conversations that he's having, really understanding who his audience is and what they care about, what he cares about, more importantly, right? Who he is now as a father is much different than the person and priorities that he had as a 27-year-old when we started working together, right? And so I can appreciate and respect that he, much like the rest of us, is learning. Granted, it's under a much more refined microscope and with much more consequences, right?
Yeah, we get to fuck up in the shadows.
Yeah, exactly.
If he says something right or wrong in anyone's opinion, he's front and center under the spotlight.
It's neither right nor wrong. Exactly. And I think ultimately in instances like that, you just want to be as supportive as reasonably possible for people that are going through a process, right? And
when he started, the first thing that was said, it was about the riots between the ability for a teacher to use pronouns to LGBTQ plus community, right? That was the original inception. Was he made his own personal opinion out there in public, which was actually, according to one poll that I read, it was the opinion of 39% of America. So it's like not particularly controversial. If anything, I think it was the highest bulk of opinion on that particular topic. So he hasn't even said anything particularly out of pocket. It's in agreement with the majority of America. But then, of course, you get the other 30% that are heavily against that opinion, like yapping up and going on and like really stirring and becoming this big drama, right? Was that the initial part of that?
I mean, taken
situation?
even further, right? I think I know what was most jarring about that conversation and reaction that he had to the video, which you're referencing, where there was like a fight outside of a school or a school district office around Pride Month, right? Is the fact that at least within the gaming community and the live stream community, the gaming community has always generally been, or at least more recently, I should say, very inclusive, right? And so that really conflicted, at least to some people, with the sentiment that Nick shared in reaction on Twitter. I think at the end of the day, regardless of the substance of what anyone says or does, it's all about timing and it's all situational, right? When someone says something and where someone says something is even more important than the actual thing that is said and done, right? You've got to read the room and you've got to understand who you're talking to, why and when. And so I think, I could be wrong, but I think Nick's tweet came like first week of June.
All right.
So really kicked off Pride Month with a banger. I don't know if that tweet would have had the same ripple effect on July 1. But again, right, it is a part of a learning process. You would like to believe I say collectively, because I do take some ownership in not having prepared him or us as a company well enough to at least be mindful of, hey,
maybe
June,
push a few weeks.
Pride Month. Maybe some of these conversations, if you're having these thoughts or feelings, push them off a little bit later in the year or have them offline. So everything is situational, right? Going back to even, the success that I've had, situational, timely.
Yeah.
Right? Would we have had the same amount of impact? Would we have driven the same amount of dollars if I started this company now in 2024? As confident as I am in my skill set and experience? Absolutely not. Right place, right time. And I think ultimately instances like that of controversy, at least more recently, wrong place, wrong time, wrong forum, wrong community.
And unfortunately, that does then have a direct effect on yourself. You've got to come into PR mode and you got to help mitigate, come up with like the way that you're going to move forward. But not only that, financially, you will lose deals over certain things that are said. If you say the wrong thing and it rubs up the wrong person in the wrong company or the right company that you're currently working with, it can cut an entire deal that's on the table currently or something that's potentially down the line. And I know Activision pulled his skin in that particular moment, right? How does that conversation go down from your end? Do they ring you and explain to you? Do you have an ability to fight it? Or is it just, you've lost the skin as a result of all the revenue that comes with that?
Yeah, we've always had a great relationship with Activision. And I would say, with the exception of Activision, the rest of Nick's partners in our relationship with them has remained stronger than ever, right? Really every brand partner of Nick's I had conversations with immediately after that whole moment, and they all stayed on board, because as polarizing as Nick may be, that's what you buy into, right?
Yeah.
He is the massive superstar and massive personality he is because he is so polarizing. So everyone kind of knew, and we're transparent about who we present and how they're presented, right? We're not trying to hide anything or hide skeletons in the closet. You get what you pay for kind of thing. And
I can just see you in the meetings, like with the whole lawyer act on, like, Your Honor, you knew who you were working with.
you're right. It's not a secret at all. And that's the gift and the curse of having such an outspoken personality and being so vocal. You're gonna get it all, right? And 99% of people appreciated that. It's just, again, timing. Does the skin get pulled if the conversation happens in January 5th as opposed to June 2nd? I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Not saying that what he said was right or wrong, but the conversations that we had afterwards, I had conversations immediately with every brand partner on board, every prospective brand partner that we were talking to. Also, too, right? Had conversations with everyone on the talent roster and the rest of my team and company. You don't ever want to make anyone feel uncomfortable or have anyone feel like they don't want to be associated with or be around a particular conversation or person or thing, right?
That's right.
So checking in with everyone, checking in with myself too, to really understand and evaluate, right? Is this a situation and moment that I can tolerate as a business owner, as a manager, because I have a responsibility and duty to a handful of people, including Nick as a client. And so, yeah, I mean, those conversations, there was a lot, learned a lot, super stressful time. But yeah, Activision was the only brand partner that jumped off as swiftly as they did. And I'll say, honestly speaking, I didn't, and after having spoken to Nick, we didn't try to compel or convince them otherwise.
Yeah.
And try to make an argument to stay on board.
Goes back to your ethos that you said before. It's like, are you on the same page? And clearly they weren't, and that's fine.
Right.
And maybe they'll come back to the same page in the future. And I think I respect that. A lot of people would have been like, no, how can we do it? Like, we're sorry. Or like, I'm not going to work with Nick anymore, whatever. So testament to what you built and sticking to your guns in such a crucial moment as well. Because I don't imagine that was a shy amount of money.
It was a good chunk of change. And also too, right? I think just 2 weeks after that, we had the UFC event in person in Las Vegas, Nick versus Scump. And that was an event and a lever to further support the Activision skin, right? And Call of Duty was going to be a part of that event.
Fuck.
And so it was fun. You could ask my wife, and at the time we had I had Nick's younger brother interning for me that summer, and so he spent time with me in Las Vegas, and hopefully he gained a lot of insight as to, well, I know he did, because that was every hat that you can think of, every situation and conversation, brand partnership, event production, crisis management, the whole nine. He saw an experience right there, and he was with me at every table and every conversation, hearing and seeing what we were working through. But I had to quickly pivot that event in terms of what it was originally at its inception. One-day event, Call of Duty, Nick versus Scump, playing with the Nick skin, into something completely different. And thankfully we had the full buy-in and trust of the UFC.
Became the UFC
to be like,
game, didn't it?
Yeah, became the UFC game, became a 2-day event. We had the first day of an opportunity for fans to come in and compete for the opportunity to be on stage and compete alongside and against Nick and Scump and other streamers, and utilized a variety of titles, including the UFC game, rather than just being Call of Duty focused. So, turning a difficult situation into something, again, that is rooted in prioritizing the experience, gaining insights and learning, and not getting too bogged down into the profitability or, the initial way we define success.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to have both a thick skin and be able to move quickly in this space and not dwell. Because if you dwell too long, opportunity's gone.
No, absolutely. And I think, like I said before, credit to you guys for actually being able to turn that around. I didn't piece together the knock-on effect of that actually messing up the
it impacted everything. And look, there's still some ripple effects today, right? If you think about, what the commercial viability of a creator or anyone, right, in the limelight who takes a particular stance outside of their core conversation and situation, right? Whether it be about politics, whether it be about society, and it's not video games, it's going to rub people the wrong way and make some people feel uncomfortable, right? So the world and environment and the business that Nick and we as a company have enjoyed previously, that doesn't exist currently, right?
It's new environment.
It's a whole new environment. I'll say at the same token, and he would probably agree to a certain extent, he's never been happier, right? To be able to share his genuine, raw thought and opinion on the heels of already having built a massive community that supports him, on the heels of having earned over $40-50 million over the course of his career, to have a family and a home that he loves, regardless of whether he has X number of brands or X number of viewers in his live stream, is something that I know he takes a lot of pride in, and I take a lot of pride in. And it's just a matter of realigning and readjusting what the expectations are, both for him and for us as a company, and whether we can continue to provide for whatever his needs are as a client currently in 2024. So I would say, I'd like to believe he's happy with the work that we've done, obviously historically, but more recently in light of everything that has gone on. Right? It requires a certain amount of readjustment, and every client has different needs and different aspirations. So
I think it comes back to the reason he chose you in the first instance. He pulled you away from the 100 Thieves and was like, I want more of your time. And he clearly saw the relationship that you guys were going to have, and you clearly saw it in him to be like, I back that, I'm going to join you. So there's been a tie between you guys since day one, and I'm not surprised that you guys have stuck together through hopefully the most difficult times of his career. And I know you mentioned the monetary success that you guys have had, upwards of 50 million as an individual. That's insane, and I don't think many athletes in the traditional sports world even come close to touching those numbers. So the fact that you've got someone in the gaming industry, still a very new industry that we're all trying to navigate the landscape. It's ever changing. It shows the versatility. And I do actually want to jump in and show you a clip. This is the first time I've ever done this on the pod. It's had an actual clip. And it ties directly towards some of that monetary value that is out there that you kind of can earn. And I just want to get your opinion on this, because it does lead on nextly to a little bit of creative value. We're in a place right now where companies are trying to figure out where the best place to spend their dollars are, right? In a time when we once did have a lot of venture capital coming in the gaming industry, it's very easy just to shotgun spread and test the waters because it's free money coming in and it doesn't seem like it's going to end. It has ended. And now everyone's getting a little bit more coy with where they're spending their money. And it is really important that you do it wisely, because if you make the wrong decision, it can be financially crippling and end a business. So this is a clip that kind of leads a little bit nicely into that. It was from Steve-O's podcast with Banks, and this is the clip I want to get your thoughts on. We'll play it out and then we'll discuss the different points.
Sure.
Is Nick Mercs a new guy, or was he always on there?
Nick Mercs has been on the team for a minute, but Nick Mercs, see, this is I'm glad that you brought him, Nick, because Nick, the old corporate guys were paying Nick $1 million a year to have FaZe in his name and basically pretend to fuck with the brand. And not that he doesn't fuck with it. Like, I fucking love Nick. Nick loves me. I love his family. Like, Nick's a fucking great dude, and he's really good at what he does. But when you can get where there's a bag, go and grab the fucking bag, And him
like
and his
Snoop.
Yeah. Him and his management, finessed and hustled a fucking bag from FaZe for more or less $1 million a year to have FaZe in his name and be a part of FaZe. And like, that's just not what the fuck FaZe is, ever was. And it's just a broken model. It makes absolutely no sense.
So when Nick does,
there's no way for us to recoup that money, really. A guy like Nick, and just like our structure of the deal. And even then, like even if our deal was like some like 360, we take 20 off the top of everything type of deal, there's no way for that to ever land in a spot where everyone's happy, because either we don't recoup our money and we're at a loss on you and we feel some type of way about that, or you exceed what we expected you to do at the beginning of the year, and yeah, we paid you $1 million up front, but we ended up taking fucking $3-4 million off the top, and now you fucking despise us, you resent us. You know what I mean?
It sounds like you're talking about the T-food debacle.
Yeah, it's kind.
What are like your initial thoughts that come to mind when you see that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel for him, right? Because look, I'll say, and definitely we'll get into some of the specifics around Nick, but what Banks has created as a brand for FaZe Clan is so impressive, right? From its roots in a garage to the New York house to becoming a publicly traded company, right? As he's built and scaled this brand and attempted to grow it into a business, he deserves all the kudos in the world. And so my gut is like, I have a ton of respect for what he's been able to accomplish. The same token, super disappointed that he feels like, Nick or we as his management finessed or hustled, right? We've spoken on this pod about taking risks, right? And understanding situationally the time and opportunity to make certain moves. And in the moment where we did the first Nick deal, made all the sense in the world, right? Mutually. For Nick as a rising creator, a massive creator in his own right, to bring the community that he had to try to integrate it within FaZe and the community that FaZe had built, and to grow it to be one massive opportunity was a play. The value of it being $1 million was actually worth more than $1 million in total, the contract, so it wasn't completely accurate there. Yeah, per year when you add in the stock and when you add in the brand partnerships, it's a great deal for Nick, right? But again, it wasn't rooted or with the hope or intention of the cash grab. It was, hey, this is an opportunity for a brand, FaZe Clan, which was seeking to grow into a business, to generate more scale, to bring Nick's audience and reach in to make it an even bigger value proposition for this entity, was worth $1 million plus to the folks running the business. Now, where I disagree wholeheartedly with what Banks was talking about was it being an impossibility of it being mutually beneficial.
Yeah.
FaZe Clan just didn't execute on the opportunity, and maybe we also mutually didn't execute on being able to provide commensurate value to be a return of over $1 million to the company, right? But when you bring in and day out 20,000, 25,000 current viewers, when you're bringing in hundreds of thousands of views daily, that's what Nick brought to the table. That's the inventory that he brought to the table. They just didn't sell it enough or high enough to get the return that they maybe hoped for or expected. It's just a miss, right? But I still believe wholeheartedly in the intentionality and the spirit of what the deal was, and was excited to be able to bring that to Nick, right? Also, too, contextually, you got to think about the narrative behind it, right? And from a marketing perspective, on the management side and managing the brand, this was on the heels of the T-Food controversy and FaZe Clan. Nick was at 100 Thieves, and FaZe Clan and 100 Thieves are neck and neck for kind of who is the, number one lifestyle esports org, right? And so there's almost this invaluable opportunity, right? If you can bring on a guy like Nick and take him from your competitor, right? That's a massive leg up that there's almost not a dollar amount that is too much to pay for that type of leg up. And so that's what, we were most excited about. And, Nick is still very much, has always been a fan of FaZe Clan and Banks, and still is, proudly representing and an affiliate of FaZe, especially now, right? As they've kind of evolved into going back to some of their roots, right? Being more content oriented, being more community based, maybe not leaning into as much of the commercial appeal or business development as they were back in the day. That's by and large kind of who Nick is nowadays too, right? We're not necessarily looking for massive global brand partnerships, but really genuinely being himself and creating content that he takes a lot of pride in. And so I think there was an opportunity then, there is an opportunity now. It's just different, right? It's all situational. But
I think it's just, like you say, it's striking that balance between yourself and whoever you're doing a deal with, and trying to make it that it's mutually beneficial for both. Clearly at the time, whoever you were talking to at FaZe Clan, there was an agreement that it's going to be mutually beneficial, and it's calculated risk when you take that. And I think perhaps maybe Banks is alluding to, like, okay, he said that there's no way to recoup that revenue. If you scratch it a little deeper and maybe ask him to go into that more, maybe he would answer with, there's no way to recoup that revenue given the current management and what they were doing with that cash at the time, potentially.
And if that's a goal, right? If the goal is in fact to recoup that revenue, then sure, it was a failure. But from the perspective and contextually, as I shared in the thought process that we talked about with FaZe, right? As growing this from a brand to a business, positioning the broader entity and it being more of a joint venture than a traditional talent signing, right? This is to create alignment around the broader value proposition of FaZe Clan as the preeminent business or brand within the gaming and esports ecosystem, right? To have the content plus a guy like Nick who does it all.
Yeah.
We landed in a place where I felt like it was fair and reasonable. But it all comes down to execution. And, I still am friendly with FaZe, a handful of the executives that were there and are there now. There's still a lot of people that do great work over there. And it's just, didn't happen, I think, maybe the way that he had envisioned it. But if you ask a lot of people, I think Nick has brought loads of value to the organization and the brand.
Yeah. No, that's good. And I think that leads nicely into, the world that we're in now. And he goes on in that interview to continue to say that he doesn't pay any of the roster on a monthly recurring basis. I don't know whether you agree with that or not, but his stance is that we'll bring them value by they give us an idea or they bring a project to the table. FaZe will 100% fund it. We'll go at it as a team. And them being associated with the brand right now is a lot of exposure for them, especially these young, growing IRL streamers, such as Stableronaldo, who we'll get into, and they make a lot of revenue off their own back in their own way. And that it's just not a model anymore to be paying people on a monthly basis. I know earlier we were talking about Aiden. He was reportedly on $25,000 a month being a creator and Warzone streamer for the New York Subliners. Even back then, those were crazy figures, and it's unknown if New York Subliners ever managed to benefit directly from that on a 25K north per month. What is your take on the overall of a creator's value to an organization? Less so a brand, because I know like they can just say, right, hey, this is X water, this is X product. That's totally straightforward, but more on the organizations, because I know 100 Thieves right now are in a position where they publicly talk about talent and how that's working out for them right now.
Yeah, look, I would say the approach that esports organizations, at least during my time within the space as a manager, the approach has changed dramatically, right? I think ultimately creators then and now have been and still are catalysts, right? Massive platforms and sub-platforms that esports orgs can mutually benefit to collaborate with. To share and tell certain stories and to relate to an audience through that individual being a manifestation of the brand values and the core message that they want to deliver. But at the same time, right, I don't disagree with the approach that FaZe Clan and Banks are taking, right? it required that they and a lot of other orgs spent, and in some cases overspent, to really see and understand whether they could integrate creators meaningfully into their ecosystem and into their business model. A lot of creators have stayed on organizations and brought a lot of value, even while being paid thousands of dollars. We work with a creator, AA9 Skills, who's been signed to Complexity Gaming for what will be now 6 years running, right? And, you know, he's a salaried content creator, creates a lot of content for his own individual brands and channels. But then when his number is called to help support initiatives with the organization, or when he has an idea that he wants to bring to life in collaboration with the organization, it's mutually beneficial and reasonable. But you have to go through those experiences of taking those risks, bringing on those expenditures to find out, okay, what are the thresholds, right? What really is that maximum amount of resources you can allocate? Because also too, right, I think what's amazing about what FaZe Clan is doing right now that hasn't really been done since their origin, right, is it being done collectively, right? This is an ensemble of personalities and friends that are making a lot of noise and creating a lot of compelling content as a unit, right? So it has that core community aspect back, whereas previously, historically, you know, Nick is a megastar in his own right, in his own island. They were trying to fit into the organization. 100 Thieves has had megastars on the roster, right, when it comes to Valkyrie and Courage alongside Nadeshot, and trying to bring them all together is difficult. And now they've pivoted into a situation where they've got some really engaging, really entertaining personalities like Legion and a couple other creators that can provide a more collective voice and vision that resonates with people and is much more accessible. So I think ultimately, if esports organizations can still create an environment and situation and culture where accessibility and relatability is the number one factor in how they put it all together, that's a model for success. Yeah. And the amount of dollars that they put into it is all going to be variable, right? I know FaZe Clan has spent a ton of money on things like these content houses, and there's varied success with how much you spend on a content house. But ultimately, if you get the buy-in and you get it from a group offering, there's bound to be some success there for sure.
And I know you said with the authenticity, the accessibility to these streamers is really important for these organizations to look into. And for me personally, I don't think there's any more accessibility than an IRL live streamer. You see everything that these guys are doing, and it's an uncut, long form version of the way that they go on, their personalities, the way they live their lives, their opinions. And Stableronaldo is one of these guys who does the IRL live stream. Huge personality, like fucking massive personality, to the point where the older generations, I'm a victim of it myself. I'm like looking back and I'm like, wait, what is going on here? Like, these guys are insane. And, you know, if you look at it just surface level, you can be like, this content is just like chaos, and it's not for me. You know, I'm a 31-year-old bloke now. I don't want to watch young lads run around doing crazy shit. But then when you actually look at it from a business point of view and from like why do the guys like this? Why do the younger audience like this? He's fucking crushing it. And they're so entertaining, whether it's your cup of tea or not, it is entertainment and you can't knock it. Tell me a little bit about your relationship with him and how you guys get someone like that, and what your thoughts are on Stableronaldo.
Yeah, Ronnie's a great kid. I've gotten to know him and I've had the opportunity to work with him for a couple years now. Feels like decades ago, but back when he was still very much competing in Fortnite, right? And to see not just the evolution of his brand and channels and platforms, all that is good and well. And that was stuff that he had always aspired to and committed to doing. And I'm not surprised by the success that he's had. But more importantly, you know, I'm really proud of how he has grown and evolved and matured as a 19-year-old when we first met to everything that he's done and become now as a young man. You know, just a couple years later, he's experienced the lowest of the lows, experimented with a lot of different things from a content perspective. In his personal life, he moved from New Jersey to LA with, not a ton of infrastructure here, but doing what a lot of kids otherwise in his position probably wouldn't have had the courage to do, right? He could have stayed home. He could have stayed playing Fortnite and had a very successful, consistent, lucrative career, but he wanted to be in a place and create content and be around people that he genuinely enjoyed being around and doing. And so when you work with creators like that are wanting and willing to test themselves and push the boundaries and also listen to others with varying perspective of different ages, right? Different lifestyles, it means a lot. So I'm super grateful for the opportunity to have worked with him and to see the success that he's had, especially because it's not rooted in, I want to be a big actor or I want to make $15 million. It's genuinely, I just want to have a lot of fun with my friends and I want to consistently create content and stay connected to my audience because I haven't done that well or well enough in the past. And to see him now do all the things that he said he wanted to do is so impressive.
It's such a short period of time as well.
In such a short period of time. And so that's what I think is the most impressive part about it all is the level of self-awareness that he has had during the lowest of the lows and even now, right, as he's surging as literally the most watched Twitch streamer on the planet, to still aspire to do more, to push himself and to push others around him is great, right? Those are the types of people that we've always wanted to support and be around and continue to work with, right? They need not be the most watched streamers on Twitch, thankfully, and has ended up working that way. But, we've signed creators and worked with folks that weren't even streaming when we signed them, but they were driven. They had the requisite commitment, personality, desire to build something bigger and better. And so Ronnie's great. The whole IRL just chatting genre, to your point, is so captivating. It's like watching a car chase on TV, right? It's there's some level of, am I watching this? What does this say about me? Like, why am I entertained by this? But it's so raw. And again, going back to what we spoke about earlier, which makes it an even more compelling format with it being live stream and the chat being integrated in real time. You're seeing and feeling and hearing the immediate feedback loop, which provides creators like Ronnie to be able to iterate the next day or the next week and take that feedback in right away to build and do something bigger and better or more entertaining. And he's risen to the occasion in every instance. September, the stats are all there, but almost literally like couldn't top what he was doing. Him, Max, Jason, Lacey as a collective.
I've been around them and I was like, what the fuck is going on? Who are these kids? Like, it's the first time I was introduced to Lacey. It was at the 1v1 Founding Fathers event.
Oh, yeah.
And they were live streaming. I knew who Stableronaldo was before that. And then Lacey's there and they're like screaming at each other, setting up these bits. And I'm like, what's going on? And then obviously did some digging. And I was like, fucking hell, these guys are killing it. Like,
yeah, they're crushing it. So it's cool to see Banks and Adapt and a lot of these guys who Ronnie and Lacey, have looked up to, right, over the years, and to have them support and uplift this new batch of talent and emerging creators is fun, right? It doesn't need to be competitive. It's not about being better or replacing necessarily. They complement each other really well, and it seems like they're all mutually committed to continuing to grow and develop. And whether there's a contracted dollar amount or a salary, $1 million plus, I don't know if that matters to Ronnie. I think genuinely because he's being empowered to do things that he feels proud of, in the way and the format that he feels most comfortable. that's the most important thing. And I think because he's been able to do that, he's been able to have a ton of success and generate a ton of revenue. Whether there's brand dollars attached to it, there's a whole nother conversation and question. I think that's a part of the struggle maybe that brands are having right now is, ironically, because creators in the genre just chatting in IRL are so genuine and it's so off the cuff and impromptu, it's an environment where it's much less predictable.
Absolutely.
Despite the massive viewership, you really don't know what the hell they're going to get into. So if your product or brand is being promoted within the blink of an eye, it could be an unsavory spot and situation where your brand and product is there. I know some brands that we've spoken to would much rather prefer, a stream or a channel or a creator with a 10th of the viewership, but at least they can say
a car crash.
over the next 20 minutes, it's going to be a Fortnite Battle Royale gameplay, not Ronnie taking a red light or munching a curb IRL streaming while he's driving around LA.
What's that lad's name? He just crashes McLaren.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. Jack something or other.
Yeah. He's a lunatic, but not in a good way.
Not in a
I personally, I don't like putting my opinions out in the pod, but when I see that guy, I'm like, oof.
It's tough, man. It makes it that much harder, right? To continue to find opportunities for brands to engage and support or the ecosystem to grow when that gains so much traction for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
Right.
And like I say, I don't like kind of putting it out there because if I was born in his shoes, I would be him. Like everyone is everyone, right?
Sure.
Like I get it, but I personally don't want to be seeing that content. When he's crashing his car and the first thing he does is like worry about, is the camera still rolling, and not saying to his friend, like, are you okay? It's like that to me is where I'm like, fuck, I don't want to watch this shit.
Yeah, it's hard. It's the content's not for everyone. And look, like the internet culture is not for everyone. In a lot of ways, internet culture is not real, right? We go outside, we finish this podcast, we're talking about a handful of other things that are, seemingly much more impactful and important, right? And so I think it's so critical, as important or as meaningful and fulfilled as we are in our jobs and in our day-to-day within digital and gaming and live streaming. That's just one facet, right, of who we are and what we do. I know Ronnie and the content and the brand that he's created through Stableronaldo is a part of who he is and what he cares about. He cares even more about family, right? Taking care of his mom, taking care of his everyone around him, right? And has little to nothing to do with the character that he plays in his channel and content. It's genuinely him, but right, it's a much more magnified version of himself.
Of course,
right?
It's a show. At the end of the day, you got to entertain people, and on the sense of family, I imagine these talent members that you sign and you bring up, you're having the constant conversations with them. You want them to grow. You see them grow as a person, and they grow up with you. I imagine they become an extended part of your family. So, in a different light to the way I was curious as to how you deal with the negative things that was going on with Nick, for example. I'm curious from like just a personal perspective how you feel knowing that your talent, like Stableronaldo, are out there live streaming, putting themselves on blast, and you hear things like Ninja talking negatively, one of the OGs in the space talking negatively about one of your talent members, and could see them as like one of your children, for example. I know Chewy, for example, always talks about them as being their kids. And then also in another light, you'll see him doing a live stream with Bradley Martin, whether it's staged or not, takes his hat off him and he gets smacked and gets fully assaulted by like, how does that make you feel when you see things like that happening?
It's tough. Yeah. And in each instance, in both situations that you brought up, right? My first instinct, my first reaction was to, give him a shout and have a conversation with him, just the person, right? Are you okay? What's going on? Whether it impacts business or not is a whole nother conversation and situation. But yeah, we're connected to each of our talent personally and directly in some way, shape, or form, right? We run a firm that is very intentional and very curated, right? Boutique in nature, where we don't sign anyone and everyone that we possibly can. There's been a lot of massive creators and a lot of smaller creators that we've passed on just because it didn't fit, because there wasn't that rapport, right? We're in the relationship business, and it's all rooted in just our ability and desire and comfort level to be able to sit across from one another. Can we have a conversation for more than 10 minutes and genuinely feel invested or interested and committed to one another? And so that's critically important. And so when those types of flare-ups happen, especially when you think about the fact that, Ron is a kid, right? For lack of a better term, late teens, early 20s. So he's still creating that identity for himself and really figuring out who he is and how he fits into this whole thing. So I feel for him as a friend, as I'd like to believe that to a certain extent, even though he calls me an old man for being 33, that he respects and appreciates some of the life experience and notes that we bring to the table, that I bring to the table. And, I just care for him and on all of our clients personally, for sure. And to see some of our clients now grow and evolve to become fathers and to start families, and to see kind of the fruits of their labor and ours collectively be able to create enough safety and success to where they can start families and prioritize things bigger and better than themselves personally is super fulfilling. And so, I want to continue with that approach and to have that type of success to where we can see and be around and support clients all the way through, right? From being 19 years old to starting a family and having kids and graduating from LA and going back home to, not even be content creators anymore, right? I think it's just if we can continue to find ways to support them and redefine success so that they're not on this hamster wheel of doing the same thing for 10, 15, 20 years, unless that's what they find fulfillment in, then cool, more power to you. But, that's the goal, right? And again, going back to like the whole kinetic branding and the namesake, right, is to constantly be evolving. We had the kind of brand ethos or the mission was very simple, right? It was empower, adapt, create, right? There wasn't this big whole mission statement with a bunch of jargon and buzzwords. I've never preached AI or any of that kind of stuff. It's, empowering creators, empowering clients to say and do the things that they seek out to do, to adapt to the circumstances and conditions in which that would allow or prevent them from doing it. And then, creating those things, or at least being able to create something as a result of experiencing that, right?
I love that.
Keeping it as simple as possible while providing the best and most resources as reasonably possible.
So on the talent, I was curious. There's something that you said in an interview. I know you've kind of given the Kinetic Group ethos and the way you approach talent and who you do and don't want on the roster and what you look for. But you coined a specific term in one of your interviews, and you said it was the Moneyball approach to gaming. Explain that to me.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've always been motivated by sports and taking a lot of different cliches and all that. I believe at the time when I did that interview, my perspective and philosophy still somewhat remains, right? But it was all rooted in not necessarily needing or aspiring to, grow into this massive agency or exclusively work with the biggest and brightest stars. It's let's have an impact. Let's actually provide and receive meaningful value both ways to people that are genuinely invested, right? So, kind of going back to the sports analogy and Moneyball approach, you don't need to hit a home run every single time, right? Bang off a couple singles, a double, but be consistent, be persistent in providing value and impact. And it stacks up, right? Over the course of time, right? compound interest. I'm going to start sounding like one of these Instagram business gurus or whatever that are selling some class or program.
Hey, you got the results to back it up, though. That's the difference between you and them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. But yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter remains then as it is now, right? With us really, and I give a lot of credit and I'm so grateful for having the partnership and support of someone like Juwan, who's our VP of talent, because she has bought in and really has executed on that philosophy, right? When she's cultivated a talent roster that she manages that is now coming into their own, right? 3, 4, 5 years later of us coming in with a thought process of, I don't really care about them being the most highly viewed or the biggest esports earnings. Let's just make sure that we're in a space and place where we can communicate effectively, drive value. Cool. At some point in time, because we believe in each other and are consistent, there will be that payoff or multiple payoffs. So that's kind of the thought process that we had then, and I think it's now starting to bear fruit when you have a guy like Repulse who has now effectively owned the Call of Duty scene in space and not even personally be a competitor, right? He's got this talk show and his perspective is so highly watched and valued, right? It's because he did the work and he banged off a bunch of singles and doubles and wasn't necessarily trying to hit a home run. Diaz, Lucky, Jalon, Crusader, I mean, the list goes on, and it's all a byproduct of the commitment and the consistent drive that Juwan has had to build for and with them.
I love that. And I do specifically want to hang on Diaz a little bit. I know we mentioned him very lightly earlier in the podcast and his ability in contrast to a LeBron James having to go an entire day to get to that point of performance, whereas he has the ability to be like, yeah, I'm going to jump up out of bed and get in and I'm going to play a game. Of course, when it's the World Series of Warzone, I imagine it's a slightly different story than when it's just a small tournament. But you have found yourself in a little bit of not a pickle, for want of a better term, but in a crossroads with Diaz as the most successful Call of Duty Warzone player in history, of earnings of north of 2 million just from tournaments alone, without considering any revenue from Twitch, from sponsorships, and so on. And he's found himself at the age of 22 wanting to retire. What the fuck is all that about?
He's done enough. He's ready to hang him up. It's amazing, you know, like to be around individuals and teams, right? Because Diaz is able to have the success that he has because of those around him, right? Setting us aside, you know, his girlfriend is amazing. His family is super supportive. Hector, who kind of brought him under his wing and discovered him to a certain extent, right? To now have the platform that Diaz does is awesome. So, you know, it goes without saying it takes a whole village, right? And so super happy and proud for him to have had this level of success at such a young age. It's our job. It's you know, I take a lot of pride and responsibility in now trying to evaluate and assess alongside him. Okay, cool. If you feel fulfilled in having the success that you've had within this particular genre or playing field as an esports competitor and you're done with it, awesome. We'll support it. Let's find and redefine success and fulfillment in other avenues, because now through that success, you've created a platform for yourself to have the optionality to do all these other things. What are these other things that you want to do? And so it's exciting. It's like I said earlier, it's also frustrating because it's like, dude, you're at the top of your game, untouchable, right? You and your teammates, you know, winning every single tournament. Why leave now? But I can respect someone that's willing to leave the pitch or get off the field after winning, right? Leaving at the top of their game and trying a new challenge, or maybe just taking a break, right? Because as much as we joke about him just rolling out of bed, I know he's put in so much time, energy, and effort and sacrificed so much in terms of what he otherwise could be doing to focus and prioritize being a competitor and having the success that he's had. So, you know, we were ready when going into Sunday of the World Series of Warzone, he still hadn't made a decision, but we had prepared different avenues and different kind of plans for, okay, if he retires, this is the approach, or these are the options that we were going to go through. If he doesn't retire, so there's that level of preparation too, that, hey, it's our job, regardless of what the decision is, you've got to be able to respond and react and adapt to still making the most of that window and opportunity.
Why did he want to retire? What was his core reasoning?
I think a lot of it was just because he's been so dominant.
Yeah.
Right? And
he's bored. It's too easy.
It's too easy. But I think a saving grace, if you ask him directly, right, has been, his teammates, and it being like a collective effort, right? If it was just him dominating solos and all individual accolades, he probably would be definitely done, right? But he's mature enough to understand the level of impact that he has with and for others, that when we talk to him after, the enjoyment, the happiness and success that he had on that stage after he won, and to be able to feel it with the crowd and with his teammates, I think ultimately compelled him to keep it going and run it back for another year.
Go for the triple.
So yeah. So, I imagine that he will win again.
I don't doubt that either.
And then by then we'll have a full year under our belt with even more preparation and timing to understand and evaluate what's next, right? So happy for him. It's crazy though. Yeah, I mean, 22 years old to be able to retire. I don't know what I was doing at 22.
I was a moron at 22. I was floating through life.
I think I might have been in between college and law school, not quite sure what I was doing, but this kid's already raked in 2 million plus. I forget the number, but so successful.
And the fact that we work in an industry where that's even a consideration. We briefly discussed this before the pod. Like, what other line of work exists where at 22 you're like, oh, maybe I should retire, maybe I've done enough. Like,
it's hard to find. Yeah, not even in professional sports. When you think about athletes, football players, basketball players, they still got to go through, at least a year of college, and by then they're only 21, 22. Then they've got to go another 5-6 years to get to the amount of dollars, if dollars is the determinant for success, right? 5-6 years. So for D to have done it we started working with him when he was 17. So it's been a little more than 5 years now. To see where he's come now is amazing, but there's no other place like it. And what's really even more impressive, which, I've grown to love about the space, is that, these creators, these entrepreneurs, these business owners, they're not coming in with a law degree or having gone to prestigious universities or coming from affluent families, and they're there out of their own merit, and bring such a unique, very diverse perspective to the table, to their platform, to their channel. It's not the same old voice and person coming from this school or this company, right? It's such an amazing and unique space, and I'm so grateful that having gone through all the peaks and valleys, I wouldn't say I escape sports or law, because I think it all kind of has culminated to be this mishmash of whatever the hell it is that we're doing now. But it is so eclectic. It is so diverse that it just makes it that much more fulfilling.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And credit to what you guys are building at the Connect Group. I think it's awesome. I love the approach. I'm glad I've had an opportunity to sit and hear more about it. I'm curious, if you could go back in time to Justin back in the day, pre-starting the Connect Group, just about to do it, about to take this leap of faith, what advice would you give to him then, knowing what you know now? And obviously, by proxy, what advice would you give to other people in a similar scenario?
I could have or should have, or any entrepreneur, right, take as many risks on people and trust those around you as much as reasonably possible, right? As a business owner, as a founder, as an entrepreneur, and someone with the amount of experience and variety of experience that I have, I've always taken a lot of pride in I can do all these things, right? I can wear all these hats, and I can. And thankfully, we have been able to juggle things, right? But in order to really build something ultra meaningful or ultra impactful, you got to trust others around you and provide them with the opportunity to carry some of the responsibilities more broadly, so you can create a platform and situation in a company that provides the best and broadest value possible, right? And so, maybe it was a byproduct of the fact that the industry, at least when I entered it, was somewhat nascent, that there wasn't a ton of folks that I knew professionally that I could go to and trust and collaborate with. But even still, right, I would advise, or I would, suggest to anyone entering the space now, especially, right, you've got to trust folks around you, or at least empower those around you to have the opportunity to find out and fail and learn, but to trust them to figure things out in the same way that I was entrusted to figure things out as well, right? So that hasn't been lost on me, but it's even more important now to create those opportunities for others, not just so that I'm not doing it anymore, right? But so that other people can do it bigger and better, right? There's so much, even now, despite how pessimistic some folks are about the industry or space, so much opportunity to do things more impactfully, provide even more value than what anyone has seen from a gaming, from a live streaming, from a content creation perspective. It's just a matter of kind of zooming out a bit, right? And not taking yourself too seriously, and trusting others to figure it out and bring in different perspectives.
Love that. That's great. And with all that in mind and everything that you've learned with the Kinetic Group thus far in life, is there anything in particular that you are focusing your gaze on in the future that you want to bring to light on the pod?
I mean, look, I'm still so very excited about the talent business, right? There's still so much work undone across the entire roster that we're committed to bringing to life and executing. Above and beyond that, right? Very much focused and even more invested in building the things around our clients' content businesses that will allow them to sustain and grow and evolve beyond the live stream and YouTube, right? I'm ultra excited about things that, for example, SypherPK is doing, right? He's still very much a content creator and a massively successful one focusing on Fortnite content, but he's also now an entrepreneur and a game developer and a business owner, right? With Oni Studios and everything that he and his wife Daniela have invested into Oni Studios down in Austin, Texas. And so I'm really invested even more than ever, right? To be able to insert myself into those opportunities and conversations when it makes sense, to help build things that can leverage the content business and platform, but allow for talent to escape it and not depend on it so exclusively as maybe they have in years past.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for your time. I'm conscious that you're in LA to see family and friends, so I will let you get off. But honestly, Justin, it's been a pleasure talking to you, getting to know you a little bit better, understanding the business element, because that's, from a selfish point of view, I just fucking love hearing it. I love hearing the stories. I love hearing the navigation that you've had to take along the way. I love the wins. I love the fails. So thank you very much, and I hope that people listening will have taken plenty of insight from that, and I'm sure they have. So
love it. Thank you, man. Appreciate you having me.
It's all good. If you ever want to come on again, you're welcome anytime.
I'm in.